Well, we've got to find somebody good there, exactly. And if we can't find somebody good off the back of that, then we've failed miserably.
Well, tell me about last year, the Xfactor. You know, I've read a little bit. What would you have done different? I know you weren't extraordinarily pleased with the results. What are you going to do different to fix things, or the way you want it?
I've got to be honest with you. Now I've sat back and I've looked at the landscape. Mm-hmm. I can look back and say I'm glad that we made the show that we made. Mm-hmm. As a first season, we didn't compromise on anything. I think the talent that came out of it was good, and I think we positioned ourselves well for the second year. Because I had to remind myself what it was like when we first launched Idol, when I first launched Xfactor in the UK. You know, first years are always your tough ones. Mm-hmm. And if you've done a good enough job year one, you're going to do better year two. And I think that's what's going to happen this year, both in terms of the people who watch it, in terms of the talent that comes through. Because at the end of the day, the reason you make these shows is you've got to find a star who can sell all over the world. And that's the only reason why we make these shows, genuinely. It doesn't happen every year, but that's the sole purpose behind it. It's not just making a TV show. It's you can find a star off the back of it. And this show has done this, around the world really, really successfully.
Sure. No, I was over in Copenhagen visiting my in-laws, and the entire family's cranked around the TV watching the Xfactor. Hell, this was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think in Denmark it got a crazy number, like 90% of the population used to watch the final.
No, it shut the whole town down. It was what everybody did. It was wild. Yeah.
Well, that's what we're going to try and do this year. I mean, I'm a trier. Every time we put a show on, it's like got to make it better, got to get more people to watch it, and importantly, we've got to find better people every year.
So you hang a bounty on it this time. $5 million recording. $5 million. Contract. What is a $5 million recording contract in a nutshell?
Well, a lot of people will describe a contract as a $1 million contract where they add in the advance to the artist, the marketing costs, recording costs, and video costs. This is slightly different. On this show, you get a $5 million advance against your earnings.
Really?
So for every year for 5 years, you get $1 million paid to you. And that is recouped against your earnings. But if you don't sell any records, you still keep the $5 million. So, it's ballsy, but we thought, because it was getting so competitive in America,
sure,
that we had to prove a point that we're serious about the talent. And I said, well, the most, serious way we can do this, you put your money where your mouth is, absolutely right. And we did it year one, and then I had to go back to Sony, who are my partners, and say, you prepared to do it again? It's 100% yeah, mm-hmm. And they're doing it.
Well, I'm impressed because I figured it would have a lot of hitches and a lot of this and a lot of that. So, I mean, I understand recording contracts, and that's why I asked what a $5 million. So you're getting paid, and if you out-earn that, then you get more money, of course. But
correct.
But you actually get the advance, and it's a draw against future earnings, but it is not. They don't have to pay it back.
No, they don't.
That's pretty strong. I don't know if the public really knows that as well as the way you just described it. You might.
Well, no, that's why I was glad you asked the question, because there's so many shows who use this language now, $1 million, $2 million contracts. But,
sure,
you and I, we worked in the music business. We know what they really are. Mm-hmm. This is different from any other show that's gone out before. And we wanted actually to be the biggest prize ever on one of these types of shows. Because, where there's money, you normally find better talent. I mean, it's just the way the music business works.
That's the way I try to work.
Well, I've made a career out of it. I have no qualms about it whatsoever. You go to the person who pays you the most, and you work hard because of that.
Who is, do you have your third judge or fourth judge picked out yet, or are you working on that as we speak?
Still talking to a number of people. My gut feeling is no decision will be made for about another 3 or 4 weeks.
What do you think about Howard? What do you think about Howard Stern on the talent show? Did y'all think about proposing him as a judge?
Well, I was part of it, yes. And I spoke to Howard last week, and apparently the impact he's had on the open, where they do the auditions, is enormous. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is all he's worried about is that he's going to find a star on his first season. I mean, he's absolutely fixated on it. He's not just doing this to take the money. He wants to prove that he can do it better than anyone else previously. And he's really, really taking it seriously, and I love him for that. In other words, he's earning his money.
Did you ever discuss with him about coming onto this show before he took that gig?
No, funny enough, he always wanted to do Got Talent. And he told me that he used to watch the show, and then he'd walk on the beach the following day and think in his mind what he would have said if he'd have been on the show as a judge. So that was the one he always wanted to do. He kind of likes old school variety.
Are you burned out on this, or you still have plenty of drive? Do you still have that same passion for this that you're describing that he has?
I do, and the reason is because luckily over the years we've done what we set out to do, and it's going to be interesting this week because we launched an album by a group called One Direction, and they were on my show in England 2 years ago, and I personally put this group together. They were they came as 5 solo artists, but we decided to put them into a group, and I'd say if I was a betting man that their album is going to debut tomorrow at #1 in America, and it was the show that found them, and to answer your question, that's what keeps me motivated, the fact that I can still do my job and that we can create stars out of people, and it's the best feeling in the world, I've got to tell you.
You can pick the horses. No, I understand. I can see how you can get a high off of that. I mean, once you get past a certain income in your life, you're comfortable, so you have to have something else to, quote-unquote, get you off.
100%. And look, I'm seeing this a lot at the moment. You know, that all over the world, you've got people on these shows who've genuinely got no interest in what comes out of it at all. They're not vested in it. They're not hit makers, and that's really what I judge myself on. If I can't spot stars anymore, I would feel redundant and I wouldn't do it. So I go into this season more optimistic than last year that we can do better, and I want, you know, hopefully in a year's time to be able to say, you know, this is the show that discovered you and has turned you into a star all over the world. I love that feeling.
Right. Wait, speaking of, some of the listeners might not know your background. Rattle off a few big names that you brought through the ranks. Before the TV stuff got going.
Oh gosh. Well, I've run a record label for about 20 years. I was the last
Girls.
group I personally put together was a group called Il Divo, who are these classical singers. Mm-hmm. I think over the years I've had something like 250 #1 records. I've sold over 400 million albums. So, you know, I've earned my place as a judge.
You're qualified?
Just about. I think
I would be a good judge, Simon. I don't know. What website do you take applications for judges?
We don't. All you got to do is send your details into the production team.
I think absolutely. I think I'm your man, but I've got to convince you of such.
Well, twice in my life I've backed people from radio. One was on the very first Pop Idol, where I put a DJ friend of mine on the show. Mm-hmm. And the second time was Ryan Seacrest, who had really no TV experience at all. And he initially was he was proposed as a judge, but we made him the host. So I've got a good track record on that.
Auditions, Xfactor, Season 2, Austin, Texas, this Thursday, March 22nd, the Irwin Center. Simon, thank you so much for joining us this morning. The XFactorUSA.com has more details. And hey, one last question before we go. Have you learned anything? You know, I know as successful as you are, we're all always still learning. Did you take any cues from The Voice that you're like, damn, I should have thought of that?
No, to be honest with you, I watched maybe 3 minutes of it this year, and that was enough. It's a very, very different show to us, and I think the important thing I've learned from last year is that, and I hate to say this, but it's true, it's not about the judges, it is about the talent. Mm-hmm. You've got to know what you're talking about. And in this day and age, with social media, the real stars or the real power behind these shows is the public. And you've got to listen on a daily basis to what they like and what they don't like. And with regard to The Voice and with regards to Idol, you've got to put a completely different show on. You can't steal from the other show. You've got to be original. And that's why I've intentionally not watched both shows.
Right, that makes sense. You don't want to cloud your judgment. I was speaking to Alan Parsons. Do you know Alan Parsons? He's
Of course.
A better producer than he is a musician, really. And if you look into his production background, it's amazing. Dark Side of the Moon, Abbey Road, etc. And I asked him one day, I said, why am I still so connected to those old albums as classic rock is still hitting so hard in the PPMs? The 1972 to 82 stuff, he said, because the bands played together. That's the bottom line. He said they played as a unit, they weren't broken up. And I compare this music age we're in right now to disco era. To me, it's the same.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And when is that going?
I know exactly what you mean.
When is that going to? Do you see the rock and roll band coming back as mainstream CHR?
Well, I think that you've only got to look at the sales still of Dark Side of the Moon, and I play that album, I think, to myself once a week. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason that album was so good was, A, as you said, they were a band. B, the songs were incredible, but also they spent nearly a year rehearsing the album in a studio, a rehearsal studio, before they went in and recorded it. I mean, it was absolutely perfectly executed. And right now, you're living in a track age where artists are putting out 8 singles with collaborations a year, and they're forgetting about putting a piece of work together. But then along comes Adele without any gimmicks.
Right.
And she's sold all over the world. So I think this is the beginning of something completely new, which is very positive.
Gotcha. I know I've got to let you run. You've got a lot to do. I appreciate you joining us this morning.
Great talking to you.
Thanks, Simon. See you later.